Lesson 6, Niyama. First of all, what is Niyama? Yama are refusals, 5 refusals. Refusals to go along with violence, with lying, with stealing, with unchaste behavior, and desire. Simply refusing to go along with that kind of behavior. That is very human, but always leads to disharmony. So you could say that the yamas are kind of defensive in nature. You protect yourself from disharmony, from this disruption, by refusing to go along with certain behaviors. Niyama is offensive in nature. You have to actively pursue. So it's kind of the opposite. Instead of refusing to go along, you must actively integrate the niyamas in daily life. And the first principle is purity. Pursue purity in life. Now, oddly, or maybe expectedly, like with the yamas, this subject is often finished in 2 minutes, because purity is translated as physical hygiene. So take a shower before your yoga practice, brush your teeth, take good care of physical hygiene. That is, of course, also an element or an aspect of purity, but too obvious. We do not really have to pay much attention to it. Like with the yamas, there is much more to it, and that is much more interesting than brushing your teeth and taking a shower in time. Shaucha, purity, is a matter of being consistent. Is that important? Yes, because we have a tendency to adjust our attitude depending on the circumstances that we find ourselves in. Why do we do that? For the same reason that we violate the yamas. It just seems to make things easier in life. It seems like a shortcut. But in the long term, it is not. Purity is about being principled, regardless of circumstances. In the Netherlands, we have Dutch weather it's always raining and it's always windy. So we have an expression that people with no spine, people with no principles, they are like a flag on a flagpole. If the wind blows north, the flag just turns this way. If the wind blows south, the flag just turns and blows the other way. Like with the yamas and niyamas, if you have no spine, if you have no principles, it affects not only you, but it affects the people around you and the way that they look at you. To get somewhere in life, for yourself, not for your surroundings, not to prove yourself to your parents or anybody else, we need to stick to what we have decided we want to do. And if you have a certain principle and you express that principle, stick to that principle when confronted with it. Purity, with the last yama, we saw that violating that last yama, desire, leads to the violation of all the 4 that came before it. Purity covers all 5 of them. If you act lacking purity, it leads to the violation of non-violence, non-lying, non-stealing, unjust behavior, and non-desire. When you say you're going to do something, you do it. When you have an opinion and people treat you differently because of that, even hostile, because they don't agree, you're not just going to change your mind because it will make the situation easier or go away. Look at the stories that you learned since you were a toddler. You learn about heroes. You learn about courageous people in fairy tales and what have you, anecdotes as a child. You learn about people who stood up for the weak or the poor. You learn about people who sacrifice themselves even with their lives because of a principle. On the surface, you could say those people are stupid. Why would you be willing to die? Because you have a certain principle that other people are against. But that is the whole point. It's about standing up for who you are and what you believe in. So purity applies to your motive. Why do you do what you do? Why do you say what you say? And your template for that is the 5 yamas that come before it. So this makes life of a yogi, especially in the beginning, a little bit complicated. Because you always have to ask yourself, why do I feel like this? Remember the story I told you about 20 years ago. We had a male student in the class who said, at the hand of the subject of non-lying and non-stealing, he said, I have a colleague who has affairs. He has affairs with 3 married women. Those married women, they have children, they have families. Based on what I'm learning today, truthfulness, non-stealing, I feel obligated to inform those families about what those women are doing. And you remember that I told you, I kind of made him question himself. First, I asked him, what will be the consequence if you do that? You may be right in the first instance, but then you have to ask yourself, what will happen after? And you can easily see that he was about to destroy many people's lives, innocent children, break up families as a result of his righteousness. His righteousness is not wrong, but it is overruled by the consequences. That is purity, that you honestly ask yourself. More importantly, purity is the question, why do I feel so indignant? Why do I feel so bad about this guy having affairs? Honestly, Could it be, possibly, that I'm a little bit jealous? That is purity. Being honest about your motive. And take a stance based on that. Control your emotions and your impulses based on that. That is purity. Purity is the things that you say to people, what is behind it? Because very often, the things that we say and do, they have a hidden meaning. We have ways of manipulating people in indirect ways. That is impure. Of course, you cannot always avoid it, but when it happens, you have to ask yourself what you are doing and why you are doing it, and what consequences it will have. It can be there is an overriding principle that demands from you that you apply some little trick. But then you do that for a good reason. You do that to make things better, not to make things worse, at least on the other end of the story. Try to imagine how you feel when you are being confronted with people who are like the flag in the Netherlands that flows with the wind, whatever direction they go. How do you feel about that? It gives a very negative impression. Unreliable, unstable. So it destroys respect. Not only respect from people to you, but subconsciously you know and feel that what you are doing is not correct, but you just can't help yourself. So it destroys self-respect in the same way that it destroys respect from people coming towards you. But now the other side of the coin. How do you regard people who are principled and stick to their principles, even when it becomes very challenging and difficult to stick to your principles? People who keep their back straight, people who are willing to sacrifice for the sake of truth. How do you feel about that? You admire those people. That is why, since you were a child, you listened to stories from your teachers and parents of those kind of people who had these wonderful characteristics of having a spine, having a character, having principles, even to the point that they would sacrifice their lives for it. And there are real life people who did that, people who stood up for victims of war and got killed because of it. People who stood up for the truth in countries where people are oppressed and denied the truth. Those people end up for life in prison, being tortured and what have you. I'm not saying that that is something you should do too. But I'm trying to give you an idea of what purity is about and the consequences that it has on your life and on the way that people perceive you and the way that you perceive yourself subconsciously. That's only an aspect of purity. Being consistent here means to not fly the flag with the wind. Even if you have the wind head on, stick to your principle. Not like a fanatic, not like a radical, but from a higher point of consciousness, from the deep belief that it is the right thing to do, from your crown chakra, from your insight in the yamas, that you feel resistance even at the thought of violating them, of breaking those principles. So that doesn't make life easy. On the contrary, it's kind of masochistic to be a principled person. But it is, in the long term, very rewarding. It creates trust, reliability. People show admiration, want to work with you if there's an opportunity to do so, are willing to be cooperative when required. While the opposite is true, when you are not pure, then people feel resistance, and even when it comes down to it and the need is the highest, they're not willing to help you out, to support you. Or even in a worst case scenario, they're kind of inclined to sabotage whatever it is that you try to achieve. Purity is also, well, we mentioned it before, just being yourself. Because anything else that you pretend to be that you are not, other than yourself, is impure. And yet, we live in a world where unknowingly, many people do not even exactly know who they are, and what they portray to be is indoctrinated by the media for a large part, by upbringing, by culture. There are many, I have met many yoga practitioners who, when we have a conversation, they feel the need to emphasize that they have long-term experience with yoga. I practiced yoga for 12 years, and I noticed often, not always, I noticed that people who kind of take themselves serious where it comes to yoga, they talk in a very specific way. They want to appear to be calm and cool. So they slant their eyes a little bit and they speak as if they had just been smoking marijuana. Like as if they are drugged. Yeah, man, I'm a yogi too, you know, and I practiced yoga for so many years. I did Kundalini yoga. I understand what is happening there, but so many years being involved in yoga myself, I see that the reality of a real yogi is actually the opposite of appearing to be drugged. Because it is all about energy. If you are a real yogi, you are a ball of energy, and energy is inherently unstable. So you have a tendency to be like a rubber ball, you know, that bounces up and down like a ping pong ball sometimes, because that is what energy does. So talking like as if you are drugged is actually proving the opposite. That doesn't mean that they haven't practiced yoga for many years. They just have the wrong idea about it. They have just adopted that kind of attitude because they want to belong to the world of yoga and be taken seriously. You see? Can you see the picture here? I say, just be yourself, whatever that is. If you look at me, if you look at how I portray myself, you would think, what kind of fake yogi is that? I'm constantly fidgeting, I know. I'm all over the place. I'm pulling my toe, and I'm scratching my nose, and I'm my arm, and then here and there. I know, I can see the video back, and then but that is all energy. And my eyes are not slanted, I'm full of fire when I talk about things that really matter to me. I'm passionate. That's energy. If you're lacking energy, you're lacking passion, you're lacking inspiration, enthusiasm. And that is just so in contradiction with yoga. People who practice yoga for a longer period of time become more and more energetic. Not calmer and cooler. Yet you are calmer in a certain way, but not in a drugged kind of way. I'm very contemplative, and I find my contemplative moments when I walk in the street or even when I drive my car. I find contemplative moments all throughout the day and the night, even in my dreams. That is where your focus lies. That is where your calm lies. But when you are occupied with something that touches you, that makes you enthusiastic, you're full of fire. Otherwise, you're not a real yogi. So, I never portray myself as a yogi. Of course, I have to teach, I have to give you examples, but when I decided not to teach for a year, 2019, I gave up. I made myself believe I'm a fake yogi. I haven't achieved anything. It was all for nothing, and let's just move on and do something totally different. I do not have an image of myself as a yogi. I don't like to even use the word or the titles that they have given me, because it's necessary it's necessary for promotion of what you do, otherwise nobody will come to your class. But it doesn't feel pure. Because I'm not a yogi, I'm not a yogacharya, I'm not a secretary of the International Yoga Federation. Who I am? I'm just me. And that's what you get. But many yoga teachers in all cultures, in all parts of the world, they play the role of a yogi. They try to dress in certain ways that make other people believe that they are a yogi. They talk in certain ways. They have a hairstyle in certain ways. Men with ponytails, and they grow a beard and then they braid their beard and what have you. I ask myself, so what are you trying to portray there? What are you trying to... Just be yourself. Whatever that is. And when I had that kind of burnout 3 years ago, I had to kind of reset myself. It was kind of a reset. But the moment that the opportunity came and the dogs became stable, and the opportunity came to rent a studio for just a day close to home so that I don't have to go too far away from the dogs, the light went on. I became very enthusiastic immediately, and that is when I knew that it was the right time to start again. What I do, nothing is calculated, nothing is prepared in a way. That is not true. I spent many years developing, of course, the courses, but I'm just being myself. And Emma told me to make what do you call it, playlist on YouTube, so you can compare. Now there are 3 playlists, I think, in total, or 4, or 4 different courses. you can compare. You will see that every time we have the same particular subject, every time the lecture is different. The story is different. I don't stick to the written text. That is just a guideline. But if you're not pure, you have to keep up appearances. You have nothing to say other than what you have in your book. Now look at it in this way. We have all been young, we've all been in school. And you know there are teachers that you like very much, and there are teachers that you hate. Now I understand why. We blame it on the subject. I hate French, I hate science, It's not the subject that you hate. It's the difference is in the teacher. If the teacher really likes the subject that they teach, they stand there in front of the class and they speak, they teach from inspiration, and it touches your heart. And regardless of the subject, you want to hear what that teacher has to tell you. But if the teacher just sees it as a job, just to get their monthly salary, they have nothing new to tell. And they will read you something from a book, and then they will say, your homework, study and memorize chapter 3, paragraph 1 to 5. And next week we'll do a test. Especially for young people, it's so spirit killing, it's boring. So it's not the subject that you don't like. Of course you have your preferences, but it's the teacher that makes it or kills it. And this is also the message of purity. Shaucha is to more and more in life focus on those things that make you enthusiastic. Stop being a boring gray adult and try a little bit more to be a child. Focus on the things that make you happy. Sounds really stupid and frivolous, doesn't it? Childish. But you know, the secret here is all energy. And when you keep yourself busy with things that are mandatory, obligation, and you don't like it, it kills your energy. And when you keep yourself busy with things that attract your attention, that make you enthusiastic, that make you happy, it makes energy rise up. So it sounds funny, but that's yoga. Yoga is not just what you do on your mat here and on your cushion. That's only laying the foundation. It is much more what you do and how you do it in your daily life. That is purity. Purity is being principled. One of your most important principles is to follow your heart. And that automatically entails just being yourself. Whatever that is. Whatever that is. That is how you discover your heart's content. Purity is also, and this is very important, to let go of anger, regret, blame, guilt, malice. All these emotions that can poison ourselves from inside. And with that, poison the relationships that we are surrounded with. This is very important because all of us get hurt. All of us do things that we later regret. Emotion, all these elements that I mentioned, anger, regret, guilt, malice. These are all emotions. And human beings subconsciously have a tendency, because of ego, to attach to the emotion. And when we attach to an emotion, we drown in the emotion. So the emotion doesn't have any constructive function anymore. All it does is make us miserable. It harms us very much, even to the point that it paralyzes our normal functioning in life. That is impure because emotion has a very clear function. So we have to overcome ego and simply, rationally look at our emotion. Be very honest about it. And not deny the reality. So again, you are looking at the yamas here. When we got hurt by people in the past, we can still on a daily basis continue to be hurt, even though it happened 15 years ago. And we do. Human beings do. The memory comes up at just random moments during the day and the night, and you relive the pain again, even though it is not happening anymore. Even though it happened 15 years ago, we still are influenced by it, and we still allow our lives to be made miserable by it. So it's time that you start honestly looking at this emotion. What happened that makes you feel like that? And more importantly, why did it happen? Why did people behave the way that they did that hurt me? Or, when it comes to regret, why did I behave in a way that hurt others? This is very delicate and very difficult, but it's very important that you pay attention to this. Because it determines your life. It determines your life. First and foremost, realize that the people that hurt you in the past did so out of ignorance. You know, in philosophy and religion, you are being asked to forgive. And you think, why should I forgive people that hurt me so bad? But this is very important, because you cannot start to forgive yourself if you cannot forgive others. And it starts with the realization that the people that hurt you did so out of ignorance. And that automatically means that the wrongs that you did in the past, you did out of ignorance. And that is why you have to let go of guilt too. Regret and guilt. How do you deal with it then? Learn something from it. That's the whole purpose of the experience. And hope and wish that the people who did wrong in their ignorance towards you, hope that they will learn something from it too. But that is not your main concern. Your main concern is yourself. How do you handle it? And you will see, because you start doing this consciously, you will rise above those people, because they continue to function in ignorance. They continue to hurt other people, while you are now slowly starting to transform. Remember this, when you are struck by emotion, first there is the shock, the pain, but You must not allow yourself anymore to drown in that emotion. Because the purpose of the emotion is not to hurt you, although it seems so. But the purpose is not to hurt you. The purpose is to teach you something in order to allow you to grow and to progress as a human being. Remember, a couple of weeks ago, a couple of lessons ago, I don't know exactly which class, I told you that I left the Netherlands 25 years ago. And most people that I know from 25 years ago, they just got older. They haven't really moved on. They haven't really developed, grown. Just their physical body is older. Maybe they made some promotion at work or they moved to another house, but basically they're still the same as they were 25 years ago. A yogi is not like that. You know why? Because you start drawing conclusions from now on. Everything that happens in your life, you investigate, especially when it comes to emotion. Instead of being a victim, you take control and you learn and you grow and you improve and you develop. So while most people 25 years ago are stuck, you have moved on big time on a very dynamic path of growth and development. That is what happens when you start dealing with these issues consciously. And because you start dealing with these things consciously, you will be confronted with more of these kind of emotions. That is the irony here. But yoga has provisions for all of this. Yoga philosophy contains the insight that you will become more sensitive, more conscious, and therefore more vulnerable. And therefore, yoga also teaches you how to deal with that. Then in lesson 28-29, we will very elaborately discuss the subject of pratyahara, because that is the yoga way of dealing with this increased consciousness and sensitivity. The pratyahara is so important that it is one whole limb of the Eightfold Path. But I'm already kind of integrating in an informal way of how that works and how you deal with that increased consciousness and sensitivity. Try to realize, try to see that allowing yourself to drown in an emotion is impure. I'm emphasizing this because I also told you, be yourself. And when you have an emotion, you say, yeah, but it's my emotion. I have every right to be angry or to be whatever it is that you feel. That's true. But you can overshoot the goal. You have a right to feel the emotion, but then you must take the bull by the horns and take control. Because that emotion is not there to make you miserable, it's there to show you something, to teach you something. So if you don't use it in that way, that is impure. That is a violation of Shaucha. I talked a little bit about being yourself, that we live in a very challenging world. You would think that life is very easy because, everything is there. 200 years ago, you didn't even know if you could have a meal tonight. You had to go down to the river to get water, to wash and to cook. You had to make fire in able to have hot water for tea, or to wash clothes, or to cook. So now everything is there. And yet, life has never been more challenging, in a way. The basic needs are there, but we are surrounded by so much information that tends to manipulate the way that we think, the way that we act and behave. It's kind of a luxury to have TV, internet, books, magazines, newspapers, and what have you. But people throw out false information, and hordes of people parrot that information and take it as true. You see that with the whole politicization of the vaccines. In Korea, fortunately, it doesn't play that much, but Europe and North America is just so sad to see what is happening there, the clash of pro and con. It has nothing to do anymore with the vaccine. It's just people locking horns with one another for the heck of it. They just want to smell blood. They want to fight. They want to be selective with what you absorb. Entertainment, for example, we talked about the example of people identifying with movie stars, with drama characters. Well, I usually tell this anecdote when we talk about truthfulness, but it is very much a matter of purity as well, because we talked about being yourself, whatever that is. I come from a big family, and the first 5 children were born, one after the other. Every year, one child was born. Then my mom took a break, and 4 years later, kind of by accident, twins were born. And there's only 4-year break in between, but it's like a huge generational gap between the first 5 children and the last 2, the twins. It's about purity. Who are you? What do you portray to be? And it's not so much about my sisters, but the whole scene that they are surrounded with. They attended high school, and already in high school they had this very tight-knit group of friends, a big group of friends. And 40 years later, or 35 years later, they still meet. Whenever there is a chance, they still meet. And their whole identity is based on that group. I think if you isolate each of these people and do not allow them to see one another on a regular basis, they will panic. because they need each other to reinforce their image that they have of themselves. And let me tell you what image they have. The boys, now men, in this social group, they identify with the Godfather movies, mafia. And while they were teenagers, they were spontaneous, naughty boys that of course had their pranks and their vices, sometimes a little bit criminal. But now they walk around with shaved heads, angry looks, for no reason other than they just want to look like the Godfather. They really do. And when they were young, they had all the videotapes. And when a new one came out, the American Gangster, or all these, they have the whole series. The Godfather 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and what have you, and everything that sprouted from it. And when they meet in the coffee shop, they play. And after the videos, they removed all the videos and they took all the CDs. And now, probably on Netflix, all those mafia movies are on top of their wish list. It changed their personality from being spontaneous, pleasant boys with whom you could, have a lot of fun, make jokes and what have you. They became very heavy, and they are not mafia at all. Most of them are not mafia at all. They either have a normal job, or they have a social security. Some of them are kind of on the fringe of being criminal because they engage in, in the Netherlands, marijuana, we call it soft drugs, is semi-legal. So it's not allowed to have a big amount of it, but it's allowed to consume it. It's allowed to be traded in the coffee. If you go to Amsterdam, you go to a coffee shop, don't expect to get coffee there. You can buy weed and hashish you can buy in the coffee shops. So some of them are engaged in either they're running a coffee shop themselves, or they have a small business that where you can buy the lamps and all the things that you need to grow for yourself at home. You can grow marijuana at home. They're kind of on the fringe of, but they're not executing rivals. They're not smashing up people's faces and retaliating and what have you. All the things that you see in the mafia movies. Purity. Just be yourself. They have, and many people do this. The anecdote that I'm presenting you is kind of extreme, but not exaggerated. But we all have a tendency to kind of identify. It does reinforce us. And that is also the tricky thing. It's like taking off all your clothes and being nude. If you get rid of the impurities, if you start living up to who you truly are, as opposed to what you made yourself believe that you are. But it is incredibly refreshing. It is, in fact, refreshing is not the right word. It is liberating to just be yourself. Because try to imagine how much effort it takes to constantly uphold that image of being a mafia gangster or whatever, without actually being it, without actually carrying a gun that you can draw whenever you have a conflict and just shoot people through the head or something. That's so exhausting. They have no idea. That is why they are so dark and always look so angry. Unpleasant. You do not want to socialize with these kind of people. They live in a dream. They live in a fantasy. And that is what I meant when I said we live in a very challenging time. Because we are surrounded, we are bombarded with ideal pictures. And depending on your background, that can go any way. You can identify with Godfather movies, but if you have another background, you can identify with documentaries or movies about Silicon Valley or something, where you have all these mega successful startup companies that creates multi-millionaires and billionaires. There are people who identify with that without having a penny in their pocket. It's all about just use Netflix and all those videos and CDs and what have you as entertainment, but just entertainment. I enjoy watching a Godfather movie too, or whatever. There are some really, I think Netflix, I shouldn't say this as a yoga teacher, but I do, because it's just me. I think Netflix is kind of a blessing, because you can just choose what you want to watch and just cut out all the things that you're not interested in. In the past, you were just depending on the programming that the broadcasting company presented you, or you had to go out to the video shop and rent some videos or CDs. You can now be selective and focus on the documentaries you want to see and the entertainment that you want to see, but see it for what it is. It's just entertainment. Many of the people that play the gangsters in those movies, they also have a normal life when the making of the movie is finished. So it's kind of, if you realize this, if you rationalize this, it's ridiculous to actually live a life of something that you're not. It's a lie, it's theft, it just violates so many things that we have discussed already so far. One more other thing is about communication with people. I mentioned in the handout about making jokes. Dutch people make lots of jokes. I think you're British, right?
Mm-hmm.
British people always make jokes too.
Usually cynical ones.
Huh?
Usually cynical ones.
It's kind of light-hearted. And actually, making jokes is energy on a higher level of consciousness. It really is. We will come back to that later, how that works. But a joke can be malicious. If you joke, it's always, you can even touch on people's weaknesses if they are your best friends. But you very clearly feel if it's malicious or if it's light-hearted or good-hearted. That's a matter of purity, because hiding a malicious criticism or deliberately hurting somebody, but wrapping it up in a joke, that is very mean. It's impure. And another thing, and this actually belongs also to truthfulness, is about giving people compliments. We give people compliments with a good intention. You want people to feel good. But if you tell me that I'm so handsome to make me feel good, I know that you are lying. Because I'm bald and I have a big crooked nose, and I know that I'm not that handsome. Can't be. But people just habitually say so. Oh, you are so pretty. Oh, you are so handsome. But the thing is, it can really hurt people. Because you know whether you are pretty or handsome, or and how do you deal with this? There's an issue with children. We live in in the past, the families were big, but now many families have only one child, sometimes two. But that's about it these days. So children get a lot of attention. Now, before children go to school, they get a lot of attention from parents, sometimes even the grandparents. And they're constantly being told, oh, you are so pretty. Oh, you are a star. You are so intelligent. You are this, you are that. Huh? And children are children. They believe what you say. So they really start to believe that they are unique. But now comes the day that they go to school. And there are 25 other children that have been told the same. And suddenly they are in a class where everybody is unique, and it's like a cold shower to realize for those kids, very, very disappointing, that there are 25 other kids that are just as unique, or actually not. Where are we going with this? If you give compliments, don't overdo it, and give compliments about things that are real. A child has to learn, has to live in the reality, especially a child, because child cannot distinguish yet about what's real and what is not, and will follow you and believe you. But when it comes to adults, when you give people compliments, do a little effort. And when you look at me, don't tell me that I'm handsome, because I know that I'm not. But you can maybe say, oh, what a nice shoes you are wearing. Or, you know, what a nice dog you have. What a nice earrings you have. What a nice bag are you carrying with you. Or do some effort and have a look. And then say something positive about something that is actually real. Takes a little effort, but people feel the sincerity behind it. And it makes a huge difference. That's a matter of non-lying, non-stealing, very much a matter of purity. Questions about Shaucha, purity?
On the matter of giving compliments and British humour. Sorry. How do you feel about the way a lot of people tend to exchange friendly insults as a kind of de-weaponized form of complimenting each other? I mean, sometimes they are just insulting you, but most of the time it's like a much safer, easier way to show affection. And it sounds awful.
Yes. British people do that, Dutch people do that too, especially people in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
People hurl insult at each other as a greeting.
Yeah.
Hey, you bald mother,
right.
Something like that. Or, but you know.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like uncivilized, you could say, but on the other hand, it's very light-hearted, good-hearted.
Yeah,
it's kind of an expression of love for people who do not dare to say I love you. So they just say, hey, you bald motherfucker.
Or that they know the other person can't take a direct compliment. So they do it in the jokey way instead.
Yeah, but you very clearly, if somebody does it in a malicious way, deprecating way, you immediately know. And that is where the hostility comes, and you end up in a bar brawl or a street brawl, or you know, it ends up not so pretty. But the British humor, we will come back to that. Mr. Bean, John Cleese, you know, all these series they produced after the Second World War, mocking the Germans, the Nazis. It's just all good-hearted humor. Sometimes a little bit, but you know, the function of humor, the function of comedy is spiritual. You realize that? Daily life brings you down. Doing things that you have to do but not really make you happy or enthusiastic. That's just daily life for the majority of the people. That's just how we were raised, trained, educated. So you come home and you play Mr. Bean and you brighten up. You start laughing, and Mr. Bean is also kind of a mirror, you know. The comedians act in a ridiculous way just to show daily life situations in a little bit exaggerated way. In that way, you can rationalize yourself. In that way, you can laugh not only about Mr. Bean or the comedian, but also about your own imperfections and foolishness and so on. And it's very relieving, liberating. What happens when you watch comedy, if you enjoy it, if it makes you laugh, and it releases your energy that was blocked all day. So comedy is hugely spiritual in its own way. It's not just entertainment, it's very it has very great value, in fact. It is also very important in relation to ego. Because of ego, we tend to take ourselves too serious. So, to deal with ego, we will come back to that time and time again as the course progresses. But to deal with ego, we have to learn the quality of self-mockery. Can you do that? Making fun of yourself. Not in a self-deprecating way, not in a destructive way, but in the same way that you deal with other people with respect. That's in a funny way. We will come to that. But ego, you will hear that word a lot in the coming classes, ego. It's a concept many people talk about, that, but not many people really grasp what it is. So we will come back to that. Questions? Okay. Let's have a short break.